Live from Vulcan, this is Derailed Trains of Thought. Howdy, Tim.
Hello, how are you, Nick?
Good. New day, new planet.
New planet. Yep. The sky is well, it's
different.
Something. It is different. Yeah, it's not quite like the sky we have at home.
No,
But-
kind of rocky around here.
I mean, I guess that would be logical.
Yeah, it would be. It would be elementary. So I feel a little out of sorts here. I mean, they look mostly like us, but I keep wanting my hair to cover my ears just in case.
Yeah. None of the people who've walked by us have really greeted us that warmly.
No, I don't think we're welcome here. Well, I mean, we're not unwelcome. We're just
not particularly welcome.
yeah. Yes, exactly.
Our eyebrows are not high enough. We're not highbrow enough.
Exactly. And pun times, everybody.
That one's free. I didn't even think about that until just this moment.
All right.
So,
anyways,
what are we doing here on Vulcan, Nick?
we're going to do some story school. So for this story school, we were actually inspired by a comment. Should we go ahead and
Yes.
intro with that?
Although I have to say, this particular topic has been in our queue for a very long time, I think.
Yes.
But I did get a comment from a friend, a listener, Eric Strong,
A long time ago.
in a galaxy far, far away. No, actually, I think it was like end of 2015 he sent me this. And I'll just read it because I think it sums up. This is not the entire thrust of our topic tonight.
It's a jumping off
But
point.
it's a nice jumping off point. So here's his comment. He said, I have a story school request. At what point does a story become unbelievable? I can watch the most far-fetched movie with no problems, and then the writers break their own rules, and I am instantly off-put by it. For example, I watched the first 2 or 3 seasons of Arrow with all the craziness that ensued without any qualms, but once they brought Oliver back from the dead, I stopped watching. Or my friend was telling me he watched Anaconda 3, and he couldn't get over the fact that an anaconda was in India. Probably the most believable part of the movie, but for some reason that is what bothered him. And he also gives the example of in Star Wars when Anakin and Obi-Wan are fighting and Obi-Wan, quote, gets the high ground and then all of a sudden he's invincible. Which, yeah, considering too that's how Obi-Wan defeated Darth Maul, that does seem like a pretty ridiculous sort of fact. But as Eric said, forget everything that happened in the Star Wars saga. That's what we have trouble accepting. Not that there are aliens fighting other aliens with light swords and lasers. It's the fact that he won a fight because he had the high ground. Again, probably the most believable part of the story. Although, again, I think they probably fudged on their own rules. So anyway, so that's kind of the first thing we want to talk about, and we've sort of touched on like plot logic, story logic before.
Episode 39, we talk a lot about twists, some of the story logic aspects. But there's a lot of stuff to deal with story logic because it's one of the main things people complain about in stories.
And we've also talked about, I think in episode 36, about realism and fantasy and suspension of disbelief. But we keep coming, it's something that it's good to come back to because we live in a very critical time period and we're all very story savvy. And so these things, when they stick out, they really stick out to us. But we thought it'd be really interesting. Well, I don't know, do you want to start with this first and then go into our bigger topic of the night?
Let's just get away a few definitions.
Okay.
That story has various logic to it. I mean, you got how the world works, you have how people work, and you have just like how the philosophy works. So these are all different threads, and like he said in the comment, sometimes the world works with aliens and we just accept that. But then why does the high ground thing work? And in some ways, there are different types of logic.
Yeah.
And so, we have to separate those things. And that's some of the stuff we've talked about before, but I guess it's just good to know that straight up. It's a intertwined bundle of things we're working against.
Yeah.
But then the kind of big topic we want to tackle is kind of the continuum in stories of appealing to your brain, your logic, in the more formal sense, versus your emotions and more your emotional logic.
So, if in a nutshell, this is sort of logic versus emotions.
Yes.
We've talked before about how certain stories, I've said before, and it tends to be more this way in books, but I've kind of grayed that out a little more over the years. But certain stories tend to be more methodical. They tend to lean toward a more, I guess, logical mindset.
I mean, any Sherlock Holmes,
approach,
mysteries generally have to play with the logic or you call foul because it doesn't make sense or you didn't set that up or whatever.
Right. On the other end of the spectrum, you have Once Upon a Time.
Yes.
where it thrives on the emotions of it, and which Once Upon a Time just ended. Finally, I mean, well, okay, not really.
It ended it's a new chapter next time they restart it.
Yeah, they'll have a massive, largely a new cast, and so it's definitely the end of an era. You should go check out the Weekly Hijack if you want to hear us talk about it.
And Tim and I have sort of a, not hate love, but a back and forth on its
effectiveness.
It's effective in telling stories. Yeah.
Yeah. And Once Upon a Time thrived in a lot of ways on the emotion of it. And in some ways, if you listen to our talk on the finale, we gave it a lot of leeway because we loved the way they wrap things up with the stories. I mean, there were certain things you could have called foul about them kind of repeating, doing the same things, about doing some Deus Ex Machina stuff. But in the end, we didn't really care that much because we liked, it gave us warm fuzzies. We felt good about the end.
And I guess that's and maybe we're just putting the cart before the horse, but I think that's the appeal to the emotional appeal. The emotional logic is that sometimes people go to certain movies, they just want to see something that makes them happy. Mm-hmm. They just want to see the bad guy lose. They just want to see the good guy win. They just want to see the lovers get together. And sometimes our desire to have that ending will let us give a lot of leeway to how they get there. Mm-hmm. In the sense that, well, we know the destination is true love, so that we'll fudge a lot of stuff as long as that's the ending we get. Oh yeah, a kiss will break a curse. Sure, why not? Sort of mentality.
Exactly.
And once we're using an example because that's what we've been watching, but a lot of movies, a lot of TV shows do this. Anything that's even remotely soap opera-ish does this, or serialized tends to focus very much on your emotions.
Or in action movies, most people, I mean, you're going to have your sticklers that there's a spectrum even within like the action movie realm. Some people want their war movies to be very realistic. Yeah. Whereas other movies, like if you're going to watch a movie where a guy like swings into a plane of glass and instead of like breaking his arms, he just crashes right through and rolls and then gets on his feet and keeps going. Like
the later Die Hards.
Yeah, exactly.
Die Hard, Live Free or Die Hard. I mean, there's some ridiculous thing.
If that's the kind of movie you want to see, then you're not going to question that. If on the other hand, if you would rather see, you want grit, you want realism, then that's, it's a completely different kind of beast.
And I think maybe the heart of this dichotomy is a story can only say so much at one time. A story is not completely comprehensive. It can't say all things all the time. And so it's choosing what it wants to say. And whether it's trying to say something, whether it's trying purposely, this whole story exists for the sake of the ending, or this whole story exists for the sake of this idea. Those are two different things.
Yeah. If it's an action movie, it's more about the journey,
the visceralness of it.
The visceralness, and less so about you usually want them to have a happy ending, but that's not the point.
But you don't really care if it's Colombians or Russians or Chinese. You just want some bad guy that you believe is a bad guy, some cool gadgets, a lot of punching,
and some explosions.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's really all you need.
Where if you go to a serious war movie, you want to know why they're doing things, what's doing things. If you go to a Mission Impossible movie, because of the things built, you do want it to be a little convoluted in a way that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because that's what Mission Impossible is. But if you go to like what's all the old action heroes going together?
League of Extraordinary Gentlemen?
No, the Sylvester Stallone and
Expendables.
Then you're looking for something very different.
That's true. And there's still a certain scale of you expect Mission Impossible movies to at least be a little smarter than say a Transformers movie.
Yeah.
There's should be a little bit more sophistication, even if you're not expecting the Great Escape.
And see, we're already confusing because now we're talking sophistication versus emotion versus lot. I mean, it's complicated.
Well, like you said, it's a spectrum.
Yeah.
So, and even something that should be very obviously on one end of the spectrum, like say really in the emotional spectrum, people still expect a certain sort of internal logic even within that little area. So
And
it's kind of wibbly wobbly.
Time-wimey. Doctor Who is a perfect example of hand waving. Well, except not. Like, depending on the episode, you either want, most episodes, you want some sort of real logical connection between things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the logical connection can be very bizarre.
Yes.
But you still say, there still largely are mysteries. Like, why are these aliens here? What are they doing? What are they getting from it? You know, they're not there just because they're evil.
Yeah, though there definitely be some episodes. Again, the specifics aren't coming to me off the top of my head because it's been about a year or so since we watched Doctor Who. See our weekly hijack for last year. But I do know there's been times where you come out of an episode and like there was a little too much hand waving going on there. Like it just wasn't satisfying in some ways. And then there's other times where the Doctor's like, pointing his sonic screwdriver and he's just being awesome and you don't care, I mean, it makes enough sense in the moment and you're like, yes, this is awesome. This is why I love the show.
I guess the emotional aspect of stories, and especially when it kind of trumps the logic, or at least it not trumps, it overshadows.
Overshadows. That's a good better word. Yeah.
Is because we go to especially visual medium for that experiential thing. I mean, musicals run like this all the time. Mm-hmm. I mean, musicals are basically, let's just do emotion and we'll throw some excuses in here for why they fell in love here, or why this, or but largely it's just a series of fortuitous events.
Which again is also why musicals worked so well for Once Upon a Time.
Exactly.
When they had a musical episode, it was like, yeah, I don't care if this is the same story you've told us before, just in a new way. It's like they're singing now, and it adds a whole nother layer to it.
And I think the thing with the emotionalism of, say, Once Upon a Time, or other shows that are heavy on emotion, lower on logical, like scientific logic, is that most people go with it. They're watching that show, and they're in that sort of zone. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's some people who are going to never watch me. They're like, this is ridiculous. I'm not.
Yeah.
There's just a certain type of person for some of these things.
And I remember reading an article one time about a person who, try as they might, they couldn't appreciate musical as an art form. They weren't going to make fun of it because they kind of understood. It was like seeing something from the outside. They understood how other people could kind of get wrapped up into it. But they couldn't. There was like some mental block that they could never really engage with it quite the same way that they could see other people were.
But I think even in the emotional end of things, you have a couple possible pitfalls. Mm-hmm. One is that if you contradict your own internal logic, I mean, Once Upon a Time, they'll say things like, oh, there's all kinds of saviors. And then at the end, only one savior matters. But why? You purposely set up a hurdle that we didn't need. Mm-hmm. And then the other one is then, especially when you start contradicting characters whom you've grown to love for who they are, and they contradict themselves in order to get a different emotion out of the audience. Yeah. And that's probably the most egregious one in emotional shows.
That's a good point, because you want to have character consistency. If you're going to have your audience fall in love with your characters, their growth, their arc has to be consistent, or you've really lost your viewer otherwise.
Yeah, because emotional ones tend to be rooted either in, look how cool I am, or you love the characters. Mm-hmm. Like, you don't even care what the plot is as long as your characters are doing something.
It just occurred to me that might be one reason why I've really fallen out of love with, I don't know if I was ever in love with Arrow particularly, but with some of the other CW shows, because they got this sort of soap opera feel to it, especially Oliver and Arrow. At some point, I felt like they were just kind of pounding the same lessons in him over and over, and he never really took it and grew with it, at least from what I could tell. I mean, Oliver was a little more trusting in season 3 than in season 1, but he still wound up doing the same dumb things over and over again, and it just got tiresome.
And maybe that's the heart of the... If you're going to be a writer or a creator that's going to want... You care about the motion more than the world building and all everything lining up in some sort of scientific way. You've got to make your characters consistent in a way that makes sense to the people, because emotion is rooted in character largely. In movies and even in books a lot of times. Mm-hmm. For instance, Doctor Who with Peter Capaldi, when he first became Doctor, some people had a hard time with him, not because it was a new guy, but because he had such this hatred for the military that felt out of place for people who had not seen where that came from.
Yeah.
Or not with the intensity that the writers were pushing it forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, people understood that the Doctor changed every time, but Capaldi was such a stark change at first. They've softened him a lot since then, I think. In some ways, I think maybe too much, but it's still an enjoyable show. But yeah, that definitely made that particular transition a lot harder.
Our favorite example from Once Upon a Time is Rumpelstiltskin character, Mr. Gold. He's always waffling between being good and being bad and everything. Man, at the end of season, what was it?
5.
5?
Yeah, last season.
No, it wasn't the end of that season. It was mid that season before they went underworld.
Oh yeah, you're right.
He'd been doing pretty good, and he'd been
training to be a hero with Merida from Brave,
and he got married, and then suddenly he's like, and I decided to be the Dark One again, and there was no setup, no anything. It was completely out of left field, and it was basically like reversing his entire arc in a sentence in a scene.
And they sort of play like Once Upon a Time was very good at
retconning.
Well, not just retconning, but making things work after they implemented them, even if the implementation wasn't good. And they had some sort of after the fact justification for it, where he saw himself as this bad person, and he didn't think he could actually break away from it. It's like, well, okay, but he seemed to be, he seemed to have been genuinely trying. It was kind of mean to your audience in some ways.
Okay, let's talk a little bit about the logical side, which is a little underrepresented in modern media, I think.
Yeah, and I know we probably don't give it its due in some ways as much. There's definitely a certain stories that are meant to be read more methodically in a sense. If you just read the plot summaries of some art movies, some Ingmar Bergman, for example, they would sound really boring. Yeah. Like technically not much happens in there, at least from a bare bones description of it.
Yeah.
But it's usually in the telling of those stories and involves a higher degree of audience participation, usually, to put the pieces together. And it's interesting because it's logical. And I know that I might be going a little different avenue than you're expecting with the mysteries because, Sherlock Holmes is logical and mysteries are logical in a sense. But a lot of these more higher end books, movies require a bit more thought into, like, you can't just, there's emotion in there, but it's not the sort of story that sweeps you up.
No, it's more nuanced. It's more psychological in some ways. Like,
kind of like
you can follow the path.
Yeah,
either
sort of like what you were saying with The Sound of the Fury is an example of a book you've talked about on here that was similar, where there's certain chapters where you had to really concentrate to piece together what was happening, and you got the emotion came through, but it was in a much more logical, methodical sort of telling.
You see the progression. You're not so much wanting to be swept up with the characters as follow the characters on their journey in a more, up and down and, internal sort of way, maybe.
I think those sort of stories, too, they tend to have less time for plot holes. There may be still some, and I haven't.
But they don't rush so fast.
Well, they don't rush so fast, and in some ways, because their stories tend to be simpler, there's less complications involved, leaves less room for, weird things to kind of fall by the wayside.
Yeah. And then like books you'll get, ones that are still very emotional in the content, but like you're saying, they're constructed purpose. Like, I got thrown in my Dostoevsky. There's a lot of ideas being thrown around. They're thrown around very realistic, emotional set. Well, realistic is a relative term, but when you're a guy who just killed old lady to prove that you're not bound by morals and stuff like that. But they're more, I guess, just analytical, both of the characters and of the plot and how things work together. Because in a story like that, if there's plot holes, then it ruins the analysis you're doing to a certain extent.
Yeah, it's almost like art as well in Dostoevsky, kind of what you said. It's almost like art as making an argument.
Yes, especially in some of his, yeah.
Yeah. So like, if you're formulating an argument, particularly like say if you do an essay or nonfiction book, you should be purposely looking for your own flaws in your argument, or where people are going to try to, and then you try to fill those flaws as much as you can.
And on the far side of the logical side, you'll have sometimes books, like some hard science fiction books, things by like Arthur C. Clarke, 2001, or Ramadan, or whatever it was. Not Ramadan, but I don't know. There's a space station one I read once, where it's so much about the ideas that the characters you really don't care about. I mean, they're moving pieces. Michael Crichton, a lot of his later books like Next and stuff, the characters are largely just there as stand-ins. Yeah, exactly. Sure. And again, I'm not saying that's on the other far extreme. That's like the anti-soap opera in some ways.
Yeah. And that, like Michael Crichton probably is not considered like highbrow as much as some, like say your Sound and the Fury.
So yeah, Faulkner. I mean, there's some people who have I read a short story by Chekhov, is it Anton Chekhov?
I think so.
But I had never read it in his a while ago. I didn't like it very much, but it was just one of those, it's very analytical of how people interact. He's digs deep into this, how people's psyches and
But I think that's interesting that just because we're saying it's illogical, it's not necessarily mean it's like
emotionless.
Not necessarily emotionless, but also not necessarily considered the high art.
Oh, that's true,
quote unquote.
Yeah,
because Michael Crichton, if like you're, I think that's a good point. Some of those books are more about analytics or about facts, but
they're still sensational.
There's still some, there's so I suppose they're kind of in the middle then of the logic emotional spectrum.
And this all brings me back. I remember, I think I mentioned when we did our flash fiction episode.
Okay, we did an entire episode on flash fiction.
Yeah, we did. Or short stories. Short stories.
Yeah.
But I remember when I used to teach middle schoolers that even in 1,000 words or less, you have to do two things to make a good flash fiction. You have to have a physical ending, like the character wants something and he gets it or he doesn't get it. But you also need an emotional ending. Like you need to feel something at the end of it. Whether he got it or he didn't. Because getting it, you might just get it, but if you don't care where they got it, it's not really a good story.
Yeah, that's
or if you're happy he got it, but you don't know
how it changed him.
Or anything.
I think that's I'm gonna forget his name. I'll remember it later. Maybe I'll say it later. There's a famous screenwriter who's written a lot about story, and I read a book of his back in film school, and I can't think of his name. But anyway, I remember seeing someone quote him on Twitter once, where he basically said, "If at the end of your story your hero gets the thing he said he was looking for, and that's it, then your story is crap."
Yeah,
basically. Because if there's not an emotional connection, if your character hasn't gone on some sort of journey, it's not just about getting. Okay, well, maybe it is just about getting the Ark of Covenant, but at least Indiana Jones also got a girl out of the deal.
Well, no, but he learned something about. I think there was a sort of the Ark. There was wonder or a fear or something about.
Well, I guess you could say that more. I don't know. I don't know that Indy learned more about the character of God.
No, I'm not trying to say that.
But I guess you could say that was the case more so with Last Crusade.
Yeah,
where it's about getting the Holy Grail, but it's also about reuniting with your dad.
Yeah, exactly. And I think good stories do both. And again, like the continuum, it's kind of how much you overemphasize one aspect to another. I do think in modern media, even like the young adult books, from my understanding of them, movies, popular stuff tends to tilt towards the emotion. Which is just how things are right now, and that's why people go do the stuff they want to have an experience.
Yeah,
and they don't necessarily go to it to learn as much as to feel.
Yeah,
but I think it's
for better and for worse.
For better and for worse. And I sometimes wondered, though, just as sort of a thought for writers, is that if we do that too much, I wonder if we don't affect how we actually think logically about the world in real life. Because if you take these shortcuts in making you feel in stories, do we also then think the same shortcuts exist in real life? No, I don't think that's a storyteller's fault necessarily, but as if all your work is only, I don't know, I think it's an interesting consider, and also as a consumer of entertainment, we need to not just understand that these are the shortcuts, but am I using story logic in real world situations.
Yeah. Am I letting my entertainment, reflect? Yeah.
I mean, we don't mind if, the guy gets a girl in an hour and a half and they live happily ever after, but an hour and a half is not going to normally do that in real life.
Yeah, we shouldn't expect that ourselves.
Or like everything in any sort of thriller TV show is conspiracy. I mean, you had 10 seasons of X-Files and everything was always a monster running around. Scully's like, it couldn't be. This is a scientific explanation. Mulder's like, no, it's not, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
But, does that affect our susceptibility to believing in conspiracies?
Mm-hmm.
Apparently 12 million Americans believe that lizard people run the world.
That's from an article on The Atlantic.
Yeah, from a poll from somewhere. Yeah, which is a little frightening, actually.
It's interesting because I've seen some of this actually and won't go into specifics, of course, but in my job as a legal assistant, I work with a lot of people in workers' comp and social security sort of avenues. And a lot of people, when they start seeing lots of what they see is just kind of doors put in front of them to getting the benefits that they believe they need. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they don't understand that it's not necessarily that the other company has it out to get them, or sometimes that's the case. Sometimes an insurance company is just not cooperative for whatever reason. But other times what may seem like a blocking delay may just be something innocent, like the company needing to verify certain information or things just getting lost and, buried in mountains of paperwork. Sometimes what seems to be antagonistic because
everything's good or bad in a TV show normally.
Yeah.
Especially an emotional one. You have good and bad. You don't have kind of a gray...
people are just a little more incompetent than we realize.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's not intentional. It's just
life.
Yeah. Office workers are fallible just like anyone.
And we don't want to read stories about just normal life, which is why we gravitate towards the more exciting stuff.
And sometimes I think that also makes us expect our lives to be more like everything gets painted with a much more epic paintbrush because we've been told, that all people are like super important. And well, you are in a sense, but you have to look at yourself in the grand picture of the universe.
See, I think it goes back to Tolkien's idea that, not just his, but, story is there to rest us and rejuvenate us so we're ready to go back. You want to go to a world that's even more brilliant to remind you that this world is. But sometimes, instead of using it as a resting and going out, we use it as a place to camp. Mm-hmm. And then I'll go back to real life.
Yeah, I think it is a very dangerous thing.
And I didn't mean to end this on a depressing note, but we're going for the emotion, everyone. But anyways, I think as a creator, it's good to be in balance. Obviously, if you can do both the logic and the emotion well, because I honestly believe the best emotional impact you're going to get when it's already rooted solidly in
truth.
In truth, exactly. I mean, storytelling is truth. And if the bottom level of truth is good, then you can write in such a way so that that's solid, so that the world of Middle Earth is very well defined, and all the motivation very well defined, and that doesn't detract but add to the joy of. Or the despair of Frodo when he thinks everything's over, and the joy when it isn't.
Yeah.
And so I think the two really should not be in competition with each other, but optimally work with each other. And it's hard to find that balance because it's easy to skew one way or the other.
Well, especially if you get into an editing phase and then all of a sudden you just see about will this really work out? You start questioning all the, cause and effects of things in your story. It could be really easy to boil down I have to cover up every possible plot hole there is. And you can't do that.
You can't do that because again, the story's only telling one sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And there's plenty of stories where I'm like, I ignore all this other stuff because that's not what I care about. And you could say, but why not that? I'm like, well, okay, but I don't care about his parents in this book,
Yeah, certain things are going to be more important to other readers, and some of that is just outside of the creator's control.
Yeah.
So anyway, we've been all over the place as usual.
Yes,
but
hopefully open up so at least some different thoughts on the continuum.
Yes,
both in your watching and in your creating.
Yep, I agree.
All right, let's go ahead and move on into soundtrack. It's my soundtrack first today. I thought I'd go a little on the logic side. So I took a remix from Professor Clayton and Professor Layton. Professor Clayton's from Tarzan?
Yeah. Not Clayton. Not Clayton.
Professor Layton and the Curious Village. This is called Luke, a True Gentleman, Prefers a Touch of Light Jazz.
Indeed he does.
So it's enjoyable. It's remixed by Protodome. It's short and sweet and enjoyable. All right, we're back.
Yay! I really enjoyed that. We need more
light jazz.
More light jazz. And it's nice to get something chill from you. A lot of times we get these really weird experimental stuff.
Yeah, I don't know why that would be. But yeah, this is good chill. Anything by Protodome is a lot of fun. I have a album from him, which is good.
Now, was Professor Layton and the Curious Village, is that one of the games?
That's the one I bought.
That's the one you played. Okay,
yeah,
cool.
Yeah. So awesome. That was nice. I wish he did one of the final theme of that game. It was awesome. Anyways,
maybe next time.
Yeah. So anyways, I think it's time because it's been since about January for some What If? What If? So originally we thought, well, maybe we'll try to change some emotional stories into logical and vice versa. Then we realized
they've kind of already done that.
So we're like, hey, what if we ended Return of the Jedi, and instead of being all just celebratory, you had to was the Empire really dead, and did you need a treaty? And oh wait, I read that book.
Yeah, there are a lot of.
And
books
then okay, take Sherlock Holmes and make it emotional, and then oh, that's the BBC Sherlock.
Basically.
So we were not having much luck with that idea.
So we instead decided, let's take some of these emotional ideas, going off kind of where we were at toward the tail end of that discussion. And what would happen to our everyday lives if that's actually what happened?
This is how we lived.
Yeah. So I think this will make for a very exciting lifestyle as we implement these fictional things that stories have taught us into our everyday life and make it a lot better.
We'll just start easy, okay?
Okay.
See, if I lived in emotional story logic, I could fix any computer problem in about 30 seconds.
Just by hacking.
Just type. I don't even have to look. I can and these screens would pop up that have nothing to do with any real computer program I've ever seen in my life. And Pentagon, 5 minutes, I'm in.
Yeah, you can hack into it from your bedroom.
I can go to a phone. I can blue jacket just by the guy can be across the way. There'd be 10 people. I just click my button and boom.
You've been watching a lot of Person of Interest, haven't you?
Yeah. I've always I'm early on, it was really complicated. Like the first season, the Blue Jack people. Yeah. Now they're just I got him. I got all 5 of his phones.
They've honed their app really well by that point. But and also learning from Person of Interest, if we could just talk on our earpieces and no one would notice that we're just talking to ourselves.
No one ever cares. I mean, you just I can't. Hi, Finch. How are you today? And it just no one even looks at you. No one. There can be muggings in the street, and everyone just keeps walking by. You're shooting people with kneecaps in the middle of the daylight, and no one cares.
Yeah.
You can get away with all kinds of stuff. It is awesome living this world.
Great place to be a fugitive,
man, or even a vigilante.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it doesn't matter what street you're on. You're in New York City. You pull out gun. Sometimes I can pull out big honking gun sometimes, just walk down the street and no one bats an eye, no one calls the police. I mean, none of this like concealed carry stuff. I'm going to be carrying my submachine gun down Kendallville and everyone's going to be like, hi, Nick. I'm like, hi. And they'll be like, hey, Tim, in my earpiece, how are you doing today? And they're like,
I'm doing pretty good.
How do you do that thing with your voice? And the nice thing is I can just shoot my gun. I don't have to reload very often, except if it's a really tense fight, and then I will.
Then you know it's serious. Yeah.
So, I mean, really, my lifestyle would be way more exciting than right now.
And honestly, any video, the bad guys can't get away with anything because any video camera footage that you have, no matter how grainy it is, you can enlarge that sucker like 1,000 times, and it's not going to be, it's going to look just as good as if it was on a high def camera.
So for our new roles as vigilantes, man, this new world is
we got it made.
Yeah, I mean, cops are just boring. I mean, they sit there doing actual paperwork and stuff. I mean, luckily also, if I want to have 2 or 3 jobs in one episode, it doesn't matter. I don't.
You got plenty of time to take care of it.
My boss doesn't care. I mean, there's some talk about, hey, you should be at your desk or something. But, I mean, there are no requirements for me. I can just be anywhere I want. There's no travel time.
Okay. We should probably move away from personal interests.
That's 24 too, or any show like that.
Any show, yeah, any of those super cop shows.
So super cop shows, I could deal with living in a super cop show.
And especially since you don't have to worry about traffic like almost ever.
No, stoplights, never.
Yeah, no. Like, there's a nuclear bomb about to go off 10 miles away. You can get
no
there
road construction.
Yeah, you can get there within 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So okay.
That's a good start. Yes. What else we got?
Something that's important and that I've learned from about every Disney movie I've ever seen.
Yes.
And from 6 seasons of Once Upon a Time.
Yes.
Is if I can believe in myself, I can do anything.
If you just have enough hope, you just have faith.
I can fly.
You can fly. You can, you just go home and be a best-selling author.
I can say, you know what? I am worthy of that New York best time seller. And I'll just send them a draft I haven't edited that I typed that night, be in a long montage.
Mm-hmm.
And the editors publish it like in the next day or two. I mean, it's amazing the turnaround of these things.
If only you just believe.
It's just, the pesky thing is that I only have 99% belief, not full 100% belief.
See, that's not going to cut it, Nick.
No, that's all that's stopping me is that
1.1%.
Yeah, exactly. And on the reverse side of that, if I ever do anything wrong, if I ever do any crime, any evil, what I know because I believe in myself is that it's not my fault. I had some really bad parents.
Yes.
Because if TV's taught me anything, emotionally, I'm responsible for nothing because I have very bad parents.
No, yes. We are not responsible for anything
not mass
we do.
Murdering whole cities.
Or,
gassing people.
And it could just
lying all the time. Stealing.
Because this one girl told the truth and my mother found out about it. And, that justifies me slaughtering villages.
Yeah.
And
obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big deal. She's ruined your childhood.
Exactly.
So you can't deal with that.
Yeah.
Look, I can rob a bank as long as I'm doing it for a good reason.
Yes, like you really had to get that toy airplane out of the safe deposit box. That was important to you. Of course you need it.
Yes, I mean, seriously. So I feel better, not only because I can do anything I want because I believe in myself, I can do anything I want because
I had a bad childhood.
Circumstances.
You had a good reason.
And the thing is, you won't hate me for it either because once I'm nice for a couple days,
everything's forgiven.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to be forgiven. I'm just an awesome guy.
It's like I like you enough now.
Yeah, exactly. So life is good. Not only going to be like super cop, but my life is just pretty much
set.
Yeah, I don't.
The other great thing too is there really are no consequences for sleeping around.
No, No, not at all. I mean, you can just do whatever you want. There's no hurt feelings from people. Every once in a while get slapped, but it's kind of funny.
Yeah, and
people are like, oh, look at that. Look, and people just think I'm a big scallywag.
Basically. And, if you're a man, if you're an established man like you are, that's perfect, but if also teenagers, if teenagers are sleeping around, it's not a big deal anymore.
It's pretty much how you should do it, isn't it?
Yeah, I think this is how everyone grows up.
Yeah, at the very worst, it makes for great, funny stories later on.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to worry about diseases or getting pregnant or anything, unless it's, just kind of a fun pregnant comedy.
Oh, yeah, and then you just like, oh, there's a baby, and then, later on, it's kind of not even in the show anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, life.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, is this real life? Yes. That's what we're talking about.
Is this just fantasy? I know.
But we're caught in a landslide of story things kind of sweeping away mediocrity.
Yes, exactly. This is the life you were meant to have.
Based on what we've learned from TV.
Yeah, exactly. For instance, also, I'll know that as I'm a parent, if my kids say anything outlandish, ridiculous, whatever, it's completely true.
They must be right.
They must be right.
They know way more than you do.
Yeah, I'm just a dumb dad that can't possibly know what the kids are feeling and doing. Mm-hmm. And they're probably solving murders right now while I'm over here and catching criminals and fighting aliens and stuff. And I'll get home and they'll try to tell me like, get back to bed, Theo, and they'll just be mad.
It's like, Dad, you don't understand.
I'd be like, whatever. I'm
But we should have remembered that because we all went through it.
Oh yeah.
As a teen, you decide I've got to find my own path. You don't understand. I've got to do my own thing. And usually, of course, what that means could be you decide you want to be a mass murderer.
Oh yeah.
But which is totally fine because you had to find out what was right for you.
Well, I started a arcade in Kendallville, a giant thing because it's been my dream for ages. I believed in myself, and I knew that I really want to own coin operate arcade. No problem about money or the fact that no one goes to arcades anymore. I mean, right now it's just thriving. And if ever I should be bankrupt and down on my luck, I know it's due to basically some really intolerant government agents who just come in and growl at me and have ridiculous rules.
Probably Republicans.
Probably, almost certainly Republicans. And that I'm probably, like, my arcade is built on some sort of wetland or something no, that's the opposite of what would actually happen because it
wasn't stimulating to the community enough, or you're bringing riffraff in, or some really, ridiculous reason.
But I know that in the end that I'll be vindicated, and there'll be a giant party, and the entire town will be there, and there'll be a cool musical montage, music there, and that the government people will be led away to jail because
basically
some sort of corruption.
Either that, or you'll get sucked into your own arcade machine, and then you'll have to
which is awesome.
I've
done that before.
You'll wind up in cyberspace. You have to save all humanity from being taken over by the machines, and then when you get out, you'll be able to just rejigger the entire system to give yourself $1 million.
The nice thing. So I became a dad. I came back to this. The nice thing about my kids doing adventures when I'm gone and me not believing about them is that at least I know that my dog is very intelligent and will keep them safe at all times.
And he'll survive anything.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
the dog has to survive.
Yeah. I mean, if my house gets flattened by a meteor, my dog gets out.
Yes.
I mean, so the comforting thing I have is that no matter what happens to me, my dog will still be alive. Mm-hmm. That's very comforting. I mean, I don't care as much about my kids or my extended family. If my dog lives, and he will, that's what I've learned, that I will be very, very happy with my life.
Yes. Boy, the stories have really made our world a better place.
Man, yeah, I don't know why I would ever leave these things. So,
okay, we get very dark and all that. I feel like.
So,
I think we've hit all.
I think we hit just about all of them.
Okay.
All right. Well.
Yeah, that took an interesting turn.
Yeah, I'm not sure I actually want to live in that world, actually. It's a little topsy-turvy. Anyways.
So what do we have next, Nick?
Let's finish up with a project update. Well, there's one big thing, couple small things. I guess just because I've been talking about it, Swordsm is completely edited. It's off. They're getting covers. It'll be out fall this year.
This fall? Okay.
Yeah. If you haven't heard about Swordsm, it's a barbarian story written by me and Nathan Marchand and Aaron Brosman. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've rejiggered it, and I think it should be fun.
Cool.
It's a short book. It's a novella. Mm-hmm. Other than that, I've not doing a lot. I'm working with some girl called Snort.
I'm kind of curious what they're going to do with the cover for that, actually, for Swordsman.
We gave him some. We really kind of wanted to be really pulpy, barbarian.
Right.
We gave him a scene near the end where like Asundi, who's the princess, is on the altar, and Margruk's there in his mask and ready to sacrifice her, and Swordsman's like, no. And we thought that would be kind of fun. I don't know if they'll do it, but that's the suggestion we gave them.
Nice.
And I think I mentioned this before. This year's sort of let's finally get all this old stuff out of the way. I've been listening to old podcasts, and I talk about Stray and Fred in my old podcast. That's horrible. And so, Swordsman was one of the three things left, rather, 3.5. Mm-hmm. Snort's another one. That one I've read all the way through again, did my edits, paper edits. I'm putting them in, getting them out to beta readers, and that will be basically on my hands in a couple weeks, except for comments from other people.
I forget, what is your plan for Girl Called Snort?
Not completely sure. I'm going to beta read it, make sure, because it was serialized, so I'm more worried that does it hang together when you read it all together as opposed to week after week after week.
Right.
I might try to submit it just because otherwise I'll just self-publish it.
Now, when you submit it, you say, would you go to Barking
I'll
Press?
probably start there just because I have an in. I can submit at any time. I don't have to go through all the fancy formalities.
True.
So I might as well try it.
I bet they would like it, honestly. It seems
their stuff. Yeah, at least the sort of stuff I've done. Yeah. And then it will be Stray and Fred after that at some point. I'm working up the courage largely because
November 2017.
Or much later.
No. I mean, when you actually will work on it.
Oh yeah. I keep dragging my feet partly because it's such a big thing, and it almost like as long as there's stuff to distract me, I will be distracted.
You've been good though. You haven't started up a new project,
which has been very hard, honestly.
I imagine it's been hard,
and it's kind of sad. But
I've been proud. You've been very disciplined in that way. I mean, even if you're going back to old projects, you're still not starting a new one.
Well, and I'm almost gun shy about starting new stuff now because I know I got all this other stuff hanging over me. I think I feel a lot freer once some of this stuff's done.
The problem is when you finish book 3, then isn't there a book 4?
And I might want to because I'll be ready to do something new, and at least I'll be new, and I'll have ideas. Probably having just the hardest thing for me going through is not only do I have to revise book 3, but I really need to read 1 and 2 and get them out again. They're out of print.
Oh yeah.
So it's kind of this giant project. So, anyways, that's me.
Yep. And I don't have a whole lot of. I'm still sort of trying to figure out. I've been doing. Man, it's already been half a year since I've been doing this paralegal thing. It's nuts how time flies. Those of you who've been following the Weekly Hijack know it was a struggle just to get those podcasts out, and those don't really require that much work. So I'm still trying to figure out kind of a new way to outlet creativity aside from these podcasts.
Yeah.
So I don't have a whole lot of other projects going on, although I should say that if you have enjoyed my rants about Kingdom Hearts over the past, you should check out, I did start a Twitch channel, Storyteller Frog, where I've been going through, my plan is to go through all the Kingdom Hearts games because they're basically all out, well, for the most part, on PlayStation 4. And some of them are just the DS games they didn't do a full remake of, but they've done cinematics of the most important scenes. So I'll probably just have a movie night or something when I get to those. But I'm almost, as of this recording, actually probably before this podcast comes out, I'll have finished the first game, the first Kingdom Hearts game. And the stream videos are available for a limited time on Twitch, and I'm archiving them on my own YouTube channel I'll use at a later time.
Yeah.
But right now I stream every Friday night. I've been playing through like about a world or two. I think like I said, this week I'll probably just wind up doing a bunch of boss fights.
Yeah.
The final boss fight and some optional stuff. But if you enjoyed Disney, if you enjoyed Kingdom Hearts, if you enjoy Final Fantasy, you're definitely welcome to tune in. I've been kind of running it a little strange. My initial thought when I started doing it is I wanted to be able to talk about Kingdom Hearts lore as we do it. And I do some of that because I enjoy digging into the nuts and bolts of the franchise. But I do have one of the people who's been watching regularly, I know is fairly new to a lot of the later, and I know a lot of other people, there's some of the later games, there's some people who don't know as well who might be watching. So I'll try not to...
super spoiler.
Try not to be super spoilery. I might mention a few, but I'll try to control myself.
So Kingdom Hearts, on the scale from logic to emotion, where does this thing?
Oh, emotion.
I was say with Heartless and other such things.
Yeah, and there's people talk about feeling lost when on like weights of plot complications. That's Kingdom Hearts in a nutshell. You almost have to embrace the nuttiness, which it's interesting. I've noticed based on YouTube commenters, a lot of people will say that the series has gone downhill into this kind of ridiculous, overcomplicated stuff. But considering I started playing in college and I was sort of fully aware of kind of the good part and kind of the weird part of End of Kingdom Hearts, I noticed it. I'm probably more okay with it than the people who started playing it as a kid, and then as they grew up, it's like the series seemed to get dumber to them. Yeah. Whereas I'm like, it's always kind of had this certain goofiness in my mind, but I enjoy it anyway.
And then our last project update is for the podcast itself.
Yes.
We've been doing this for a while, but we finally decided to pull the trigger and get a Facebook page, which is like, it's not really that much work. We just had never done it.
Yeah, I think it's something we had considered from day one. Just, I don't know. For a long time, I was never completely convinced that Facebook was going to last. Because I remember there was a period of time when social networks rose and fell. You know, we had Zanga, and then MySpace, and those both rose and fell. But Facebook but Facebook has endured. So
anyways, we're very behind the times, but we're going to get one. And we thought, if you have suggestions for ways we can use it that are maybe different, whether I thought about polls, getting ideas. We can do Facebook Live if people really want to see our radio faces.
If nothing else, Facebook certainly still has a more vibrant community than, say, Blogspot.
Yes. Which is our hosted, and we'll be for all time. But.
That's just our website. Yeah.
And we've done some if you had trouble in previous months with the downloading things, we've fixed a lot of our hosting issues.
Hopefully, we've moved the podcast over to a completely different server.
Yeah, so that should all be good.
Yeah, on the website, a lot of the podcasts are still on the old server. Yeah, if you, for some reason, you want to find it on the website, all the old links still work. Yeah, but as far as the feeds have been switched over. Yeah. So we've been doing some tinkering. Well, Nick has been doing a lot of tinkering back behind the scenes while I've been trying to get out Hijinks.
Yeah, you have Hijack to do. So, but anyways, if you have good suggestions for things you would like to see, extra sort of stuff, the podcast will always be our main thing, but you want to see videos or polls or more interactions about like what we should talk about next or whatever.
Yeah.
Tell us.
That could be a new place to leave comments.
Exactly.
Since you don't seem to want to go to the website to do it.
It's much easier for a lot of people.
That's true.
So
that's probably true.
So this might be the first one actually posted on that site.
Yes. Yeah, most likely. Because it's actually set up now as we speak.
Yes. So we just need some tinkering stuff.
Yeah, we'll be tinkering.
So anyway, that's our project update. All right, so I guess Tim, these people here put up with us relatively grudgingly.
We got some dirty looks when we were cracking ourselves up earlier,
and they're a little confused, I think, just by. It doesn't make much sense. It's like, why is this podcast here? But
yeah, I honestly don't know what brought us to Vulcan either, to be honest.
No, it's not really our place, I guess.
No, but that's okay. It's been fun to see the sights, and it's been fun to be here.
Yes, and now this podcast is telling us that we must away every break of day.
So you can, again, check out our new Facebook page at... I don't even know how to find it. Just search for Derailed Trains of Thought on Facebook.
Yeah. I think it's facebook.com/Derailed Trains of Thought. But
okay, sounds good. Of course, the website is still there, derailedtrainsofthought.blogspot.com.
iTunes, Stitcher, etc., etc.
We still have an email address, although it's never really been used heavily.
No. Do you check it ever?
Every now and then. Usually when I'm trying to look for something else, I'll pop in there to see. Oh, have we gotten any emails? No, we haven't.
See, if we were really tech savvy... Twitter. No, if we really text that, would be like Instagram and everything else, like my brother. But we're about 10 years behind the curve. So
we got this podcast thing going.
I know. So. I mean, this like new these audio casts, these radio shows, whatever they are.
Okay. Yeah, it's old timey.
On the interwebs.
It's good stuff.
Okay. Anyways,
so I should introduce my soundtrack so we can move on. So since Nick did something from Professor Layton, I decided to do something from its spiritual half-cousin.
Yeah. Did they do some sort of crossover at some point?
They did a crossover. I'm talking, of course, about Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. And they did do a crossover game, I believe, although I don't know if it was any good or not. But this remix is called Carry the Moment. It is by Ocean's Andrew, and it's very fittingly, if Layton is the more Yeah, I know Leighton has emotional viz, the more puzzly,
Yeah.
whereas Phoenix Wright, Ace Attorney games are pretty overblown.
Objection!
Yeah, objection! Yeah, they're pretty overblown over
Despite
the top.
having the logic sort of thing.
Despite being very, about piecing together mysteries too. It's a little more over the top, and that's kind of
Yeah.
what this song is like. It's very exuberant.
Awesome.
So I hope you enjoy. Until next time,
This is Nick.
this is Tim.
Live long and prosper.
Beam me up, Scotty. Testing 1.
2, 3,
You can be louder than that.
4. Testing.
This is the song that never ends. It goes on and on, my friends.
I can't beatbox, but see, this is why people want Facebook Live right here, like as we're setting up,
Yeah.
and why we don't want it.
Pretty much.